This interview is for information only and should not be considered as investment advice or a recommendation to buy shares in the company featured. Welcome to this StockBox interview. Joining us today is Ben Turney, the CEO of Kavango Resources, for a special feature on the KSZ, that's the Kalahari Suture Zone. Now, Ben, it's been a little while since we've had an update on the KSZ. It was your focus of a few special features not so long ago. But of course, you've had news recently that a cluster of EM conductors have been identified at the KSZ North area. So you have a presentation. Do you want to start us off with this news? How significant is it?
It's big news, Mark. Very big news. So I know that we've been a bit quiet over the last couple of months. People, I think, are getting a bit tired of hearing this from me, but they really do need to understand this is a bloody complicated project. It's really big. We're dealing with a 450 kilometre long strike. We've got two major magmatic systems that are 800 million years apart sitting on top of each other. And we've managed to put 4 holes into this thing. So, we are really sort of, up against it in terms of the size of this project, but we're making a lot of progress. Obviously, I know that the drill campaign wasn't very well received. I mean, that's clear in the share price. I understand that. I don't think people have really quite understood what proof of concept actually meant for the KSZ. But in terms of sort of where we now are, we got the TDEM surveys underway at the start of Q2. That's what we said we would do. I think a lot of people in this market are very sort of weary that, when a company sort of drills what's perceived as being a dud hole, they think that the company will sort of put the project to one side and just sort of quietly let it slip off into the night. Well, that's absolutely not the case with the KSZ, and we really are going at this thing hammer and tongs, as I'm about to demonstrate, and as we can see in today's news. So today's news really is very, very significant. If you'd asked us 6 months ago, what would we have hoped to find with follow-up TDEM surveys, it would have been exactly this. And part of the presentation I'll give today and images we've released with the announcement, we've got some more idealized imagery on Norilsk, which I think will help put into context the analog that we're using.
Okay, excellent. Okay. So, do you want to take us through?
Yeah, sure. So I guess I probably should put this disclaimer up as per usual, give people a bit of an opportunity to read that. So today's images are linked in the RNS, so you can go and view these together with the accompanying text. And what I'm going to do today is just walk you through these myself. And then what we're going to do a bit later this week, Mark, is we're going to arrange for Jeremy and Hilary, our geophysicists, to give a more comprehensive presentation on the significance of today's news and what the next steps are.
Okay, that sounds good, Ben.
So I've thrown this slide together. It is a little bit messy and there's a lot to get across here, but this obviously is a number of images that we've used over recent years. And I think it's quite important for people to understand the geological setting of the Kalahari Suture Zone. So as I often talk about, the KSZ is a 450 kilometre long magnetic anomaly that sits on the western edge of the Cap Vaal Craton in southwest Botswana. Now, when the KSZ was first identified in the 1970s by that Canadian aid program that flew the regional magnetic surveys over Botswana, it caused a lot of excitement because the magnetic signature and the position of the KSZ were felt to be very similar to that seen at Norilsk, which of course has been one of the world's most prolific mines in human history. Norilsk has pretty much been in continuous production for 100 years. And I realize that at the moment, obviously, things are extremely difficult with Russia as a result of their war in Ukraine. So the Norilsk supply is being turned off. But that doesn't escape from the fact that as far as metal discoveries go, it is one of the biggest that has ever been made. So when the KSZ was first identified, there was a lot of excitement back in the 70s, but the problem back then, and even up until relatively recently, was that geophysical techniques and remote sensing technology weren't advanced enough to be able to delineate, to identify very clear drill targets. We're dealing with a huge area, as you can see. It's, as I mentioned, 450 kilometers long, but it's also a very conductive environment as well. So you're looking for conductor targets. So if you think about what a metal ore body is, it's obviously quite a dense accumulation of minerals, of metals, obviously. Those obviously give off quite a strong electrical conductance reading. And you're looking for these conductor targets, but within a conductive body. So a lot of gabbroic intrusions, they are very conductive because obviously when they tried to make their way up to surface, they brought with them metallic elements from the Earth's core. So the images on the left, we've used these quite often to show the geological setting of the KSZ. But this image on the right is particularly worth paying attention to. And I don't think we've really emphasized this enough. Because what this shows, it's an image that Jeremy Brett created when he published his article in the Journal of African Earth Sciences in the early 2000s. And as you can see, what he's put together is an idealized view of a number of the major regional faults that run through the KSZ and intersect each other, in particular up at the Great Red Spot. Now, the reason that this is really significant is if you think about what these faults represent, it's basically huge amounts of tectonic activity over hundreds of millions of years. And where the Earth's crust comes together and breaks apart, that's where you've had these huge magmatic systems where vast amounts of magma were being drawn up from surface in these intrusive events, obviously bringing with them these metallic elements. Now, if that magma was subjected to the right conditions, and a number of geochemical processes could happen. And in the case of what we're looking for, it's called sulfur saturation. So where sulfur normally found in, let's say, coal beds, would interact with the magma, would draw together the metallic elements to form this very heavy, immiscible liquid that would sink to the bottom of these magmatic flows and create the ore deposits that we're looking for today. So you need huge amounts of magma. That's one of the prerequisites for a system of the type that we're looking for. But then you also need to have the right geochemical circumstances that have happened as well. Now, in many ways, from an exploration point of view, we're looking for a lightning strike, because obviously you need not only like the magma, the right conditions as well, then also you need to find the right trap. It needs to be at the right depth to be obviously an economic deposit. So there is a lot of complexity built into this model. But what's particularly attractive about the KSZ is because you have so many of these faults that are intersecting the KSZ, that's creating potentially the right sort of environment for these conditions to be present for the creation of these large-scale deposits. And the Great Red Spot in particular is very exciting because it's at the northern tip of the KSZ. So I've marked it on this map here, on the magnetic map. You can see it's in the northern edge of the KSZ. But it's also what's called a triple junction. So a triple junction is basically where three cratons meet. So not only do you have these very large regional faults that are running through this, you have three cratonic plates that meet with each other as well. So again, in geological terms, basically over hundreds of millions of years, a hell of a lot has happened in this region. And it's when a hell of a lot happens, that's when you can have the right circumstances for the type of deposits we're looking for. So a lot of our focus in exploration has been on the KSZ. We have the second deposit style as well, the deeper seated IOCG that we recently announced, and we're going to be putting more news out about that in the near future. But for now, what we're focusing on is our original Norilsk style model, looking for these nickel copper sulfide deposits. So, Mark, I realise I'm obviously banging into this. Please do interrupt me if you have any questions.
Well, yeah, just a quick question there. Just looking at all those faults there, you say that this can create the right condition for these kind of deposits, but it also strikes me that it's very complex. It could be a lot of complex things going on there, complex geology. Is this similar to Norilsk, or is there a risk here that it's giving you some sort of false hope just because it's so complicated to understand and there's so much going on?
That's what I'm about to show you, Mark. So that will be the next slide. No, it's a very good question. But in very simple terms, complexity is good. The more complexity, the more that's been going on geologically, the more sort of alteration, the more sort of events, geological events that have been happening, the better. Because obviously these happen over such a long period of time. They can create the kind of dynamics that can lead to the creation of the types of deposits we're looking for. Now, in terms of the actual exploration model, you're absolutely right. And this is what was so important about our proof of concept campaign. One of the key objectives we had was to test the technology that we were using. It's absolutely vital that we had confidence that we were using the right combination of TDEM, so time domain electromagnetic surveys, and increasingly the controlled source audio magnetotelluric surveys that we're using. And we believe those two working in combination will help us cut through all of that complexity, because now what we're looking for, Mark, are these high-speed conductor targets, these large-scale conductor targets, which I'm about to show you some more imagery about. But just addressing your first question about Norilsk and sort of is there false hope? Well, This is another cross-section of Norilsk. We've been doing a lot of desktop research over the last few months, getting our heads around sort of the complexity of what we've uncovered so far in the KSZ and really sort of deepening our understanding of the company of the system potential. And we came across a Russian paper that's been shared with us. And this cross-section, I think, is absolutely fantastic because what this shows very clearly are the Taunak and Karalak ore bodies that are two of the most prolific at Norilsk. And they're basically represented by these the red areas on this schematic. Now, obviously, this is an idealized drawing, so you obviously have to take these types of images to a degree with a pinch of salt. This is obviously in a published paper, so it's been peer reviewed and it's regarded as a good representation of a cross section of these two deposits. Now, what's worth noting here is that you have here this massive fault line that's running through Norilsk, and this appears to be the controlling fault for the mineralization. So, on the previous slide, where I talk about all of these faults these major faults that intersect each other in the Great Red Spot, what you also have in Norilsk is the fault that runs through on a north-south axis. Again, it's on the western edge of the Siberian Craton, so you can see how the fault runs sort of on a north-south basis. I'm highlighting it with my cursor here. And either side of that fault, that's where the controlled mineralization is. Now, there are a couple of points to note on this cross-section is that, first of all, these are quite flat sills. So the Norilsk ore bodies, they're quite flat, horizontal in nature. But also you can see here, they've also been subjected to other geological pressures as well. And this bend is actually, it's quite significant from our point of view, from an exploration perspective, because modeling the geometry of a geological artifact like this is a very complicated thing to do. So this is one of the challenges that we face, is that not everything sort of appears in sort of nice linear boxes for us to be able to analyze and to present. You know, we have to build a degree of guesswork into our geophysics, which obviously is made much more difficult by the fact that the actual shape of the bodies we're looking for can be sort of quite non-linear, because obviously over time they've been subjected to other geological forces, again, as you know, the Earth's crust has moved and there's been all sorts of tectonic activity. But again, the key point now to remember for now is the fact these are horizontal. Now we're looking here at a plan view, again, of the Taunak intrusions, which have the Taunak and the Karalak ore bodies. And again, what you have here is you have the major fault that runs through on a north-south basis. And either side of that, we've got intrusive rocks, which are indicated by purple. So those basically are gabbros. Those don't bear the ore bodies, but the ore bodies obviously are set within the gabbros. And if you look at this plan view, the key thing to bear in mind here is the fact that these occur in a big cluster. And it's that cluster point that we think is really important for the news that we've released this morning in terms of what we've identified now with our latest EM surveys. Before I go on, do you want anything else to ask on that?
I think that's pretty clear. That's laid out the comparison there with Norilsk quite well, I think.
Thank you. So, well, look, what I'll now do is we'll look on the next slide. So this is a new version, a new view of the KSZ. I've got to be honest, I don't know why we haven't released this in the past. To be honest, it's something we've just overlooked, because to remind you, the Great Red Spot sits at the northern edge of the KSZ. And what we're looking at here is our ground magnetic data. So Kavango ran a series of ground mag surveys to supplement the aeromag surveys. And one of Hillary's, and I've got to say, this is all credit to Hillary here, part of the reason that Hillary chose this area for one of the original TDEM loops, so loop 4 back in Q2 2021, was because his interpretation of the ground mag data was that there were a number of dikes at the northern edge of the Great Red Spot. Now, again, this is his interpretation of the magnetics, but again, this is a lot of sort of educated guesswork that goes into this kind of work, a lot of interpretation. But Hillary's interpretation was that these lines that you can see sort of on the northernest spot edge of the Great Red Spot, they could represent potential dikes. Now, the reason that's important is a dike is a vertically inclined magmatic system where obviously magma gets drawn up to surface. And if you have a number of these that are cross-cutting, again, it adds to that picture of complexity that I described at the beginning, where the more you have going on geologically, the greater the chance you have of the type of ore bodies that we're looking for being created. So he felt originally that, this was a good place to look, and I'm going to show you where Loop 4 was originally positioned. But what I've also included on this diagram is we've put where we've now modeled the B1 conductor. So this is the plate model of the B1 conductor, which is now modeling at 14,350 Siemens from surface. This is the target that we missed when we drilled back in February, because what we also have is this B2 target that we're not now calling a conductor, but we believe is a possible conductive fault. So we believe it's a fault that runs parallel to these possible dike structures. Now, again, the reason that that's important is that kind of symmetry in a complex geological environment, that can give you an indicator that you're looking in the right sort of area for the type of deposits we're looking for. And if I just take us quickly back to the plan view of the Norilsk deposits that we were just looking at, again, you can see the same thing here. You have this north-south controlling fault, and then parallel to that, you have additional faults. So we have another fault here sort of running, as you can see. You see the black lines that are faults that are running through Norilsk, which either side of those, you obviously have the intrusive bodies and, of course, the mineralized zones. So when we first originally modeled this, we picked up from the TDEM data both the B1 conductor, which is now a much, much stronger conductive body than we originally modeled. So when back in Q2 last year, when we first announced this, we had this as an 8,200 Siemens body, because what Hillary and Kaz, the interpretation that they put together is they combined the data from these two bodies to create the single plate. And of course, that wasn't correct. The geology was much more complex, but we had to start somewhere. And the whole purpose of this, of doing drilling holes like this, is so that you can also then do downhole EM. And downhole EM is an extremely important exploration tool for us, because obviously once we put a hole into the ground, we can use the downhole probe to look 300 meters either side of the hole to give us a much clearer view of actually the complex geology that we're dealing with. And of course, the hole that we drilled pretty much went in between these two bodies, which we were how we were able to identify, first of all, the smaller, much more compact B1 conductor, which has obviously got a much stronger conductance reading than it originally had, but also what we're now interpreting as this fault line that appears to be running through on a sort of northeast southwest axis. So, Mark, this is it. This is now what we know about the Great Red Spot, or this target area. So what we're looking at here is the complete view. So we now have this original conductor target that we first identified last year. And this is the B1 conductor. But as a result of the surveys that we've run, and the reason I've shown this image first is I want to show all of the TDEM surveys that we've now run over the Great Red Spot. We've now also picked up these other two these other two conductor targets, strong conductor targets that lie just to the north, and again appear to be on the other side of this possible fault line that we've identified. And if we just go back to this image here, they are also appear to be aligned with the possible, and again I keep having to use the word possible because this is interpretation at this stage, but a lot of this is all stacking up. It all appears to be pointing in the same direction. And if you look at the alignment of these two conductors, they appear to be aligned with this possible dike that Hillary originally identified, that attracted us to this area in the first place. So what we can see on this with the three targets, the 14,350 Siemens target, there are no two ways about it. We have to drill this thing. I know there's been speculation that we're going to walk away from the KSZ. Honestly, that's complete rubbish. It's nonsense. This target is a fantastic drill target. We don't know what's down there because we haven't intercepted it yet. So we always have to caveat whatever we say about this with that warning. But at 14,350 Siemens, I mean, this thing is giving off such a powerful conductance reading. There aren't many other things that this could be other than a sulfide body of some form.
Mm-hmm. And you've got two targets here now, is that right?
Three
targets at B1. Okay.
B1, B3, and B4.
Okay.
Yeah. So now on the other two targets, we've got more work that we need to do on those. So these are preliminary readings at this stage, and the plate models are quite large at this point. If we're thinking about doing additional follow-up TDEM to get more sort of different angle view on both of these two new targets. And our expectation is that when we're able to do more TDEM, what we could well find is that if we're able to to narrow in our view of what these targets look like, we could well find that these conductance readings go up quite significantly. So these two targets, B3 and B4, which are the brand new ones, we didn't know these existed until about 6 weeks ago. These are great looking drill targets in their own right. I mean, they're comfortably within sort of the massive sulfide interpretation of conductance. So, I mean, they would be drill targets in their own right. But the fact that they're occurring in the orientation that they are, in relation to where they sit with the B1 conductor, with these possible faults, with the possible dike that we've identified, this whole picture is really starting to come together. And in terms of our original idealized Norilsk style model, well, Mark, this is what we're looking at here. I mean, this from an exploration perspective, I mean, things really couldn't get much better than this at this stage. Okay. So in terms of our next follow-up, we've got more work that we need to do to understand more about these targets. But and we've also got to look at doing more TDEM in the area as well, because I mean, it's quite clear to us that sort of having picked up these two new targets, as I say, this has only really happened over the last 6 weeks. Mm-hmm. If I go back to sort of the overall image of the Great Red Spot, I mean, we don't know what's happening down here, for example, or even over here where we have these other possible dikes that we're interpreting. So we want to get a much clearer view of the Great Red Spot. And of course, then there's more TDEM that we want to do in other areas within the KSZ as well. But as things stand today, I mean, this really is turning into a very exciting picture.
And this picture here, we're seeing that's almost a more detailed look of the Great Red Spot itself.
Well, it's looking at, so if you remember at the start, I said that we're looking for conductors within a conductive environment. Yeah. So the Great Red Spot, I mean, this is magnetic data. So it's a very large magnetic body because the sort of the intrusive body has obviously brought metallic elements with it to the surface. And that's what presents the challenge for us because it's conductive in its own right. It's a large magnetic body. What we're looking at here is within that magnetic body, these large scale discrete individual conductors that are the drill targets that we're looking for.
And where did you drill initially? Can you illustrate that with the...
Yeah, we should have added this on, actually. I'm going to get this image updated, but to all intents and purposes, it was around about, can you see my, oh, sorry, I've gone on the slide. Can you see my mouse cursor on the screen? Mm-hmm. So it was pretty much just about here, just to the northwest of the current plate.
Okay. And the idea is that you almost just missed it then, really?
We were within about 100 meters of it, the actual body to the south, because the downhole EM, the range of investigation for downhole EM is about 300 meters either side. So yeah, we really were bloody close when we first went for it.
Okay. And you're planning the drilling now. You're getting the drills ready, pending final modelling. Is that right? So where are we on the modelling side of it?
Well, so the modelling is where we are currently now. We have these two new targets, 4,350 Siemens each. We've got more work to do on these to get to the point. What we don't want to do is we don't want to repeat the mistake that we had with the first attempt at the B1 conductor. These plate models at the moment are a little on the large side, so we want to take more of a detailed look at these to try and really get as tight a definition as we can of these targets before obviously we commit to drilling. But if I just take you back to the KSZ image, I mean, Mark, look, these are our license areas. Now that we know we're definitely using the right surveying technology, combination of the right surveying technologies, we know that we're working with the right people. Our teams on the ground are now very experienced at accurately cutting the lines and positioning the loops in the right way. I think probably the first step for us is that while we're tightening up our targeting on the B1 conductor, we are actually going to conduct more extensive surveys across both the KSZ North and the KSZ South, which is largely unexplored. So we want to get a much clearer picture, because I mean, who knows what else might be out there? I mean, so far we've been a bit fortunate, and I should actually talk a little bit about that. Because the original survey that Hillary had cited, this survey 4, it only clipped the B1 conductor. So we only got a slight sniff of this with that first survey. We then went and did 3 surveys elsewhere in the KSZ. So we did surveys 5, 6, and 7 in other areas. But we then came back originally with survey 8. And it was when we completed survey 8, that was when we first identified the 8,200 Siemens interpretation of the B1 conductor. Now, as part of the recent work, because obviously we missed the target with the drill, we went back and we did loop 8 again on its own. So we wanted to just do a repeat of that survey on the latest TDEM campaign, just to see if there was anything that we missed, to see sort of what we could learn from obviously the fact that, we had our original interpretation. And I mean, I say it was wrong. Hindsight is 20/20 vision with these things. We had an interpretation at the time that we stuck with. We drilled it. From an exploration point of view, we did everything right. We went for the center of the plate, again, that's standard good practice, and then we completed downhole EM. So I know, again, there's been quite a lot of disappointment out there about sort of, the actual drill result itself. But in terms of the way this is all shaping up now as a target area, we are so much further ahead than where we were last July. And it's really very exciting. And when we came back and we repeated loop 8, we've refined sort of how we laid the lines out and sort of how we conducted the survey. So there are some improvements we made, and this led us to confirming this loop 8 conductor. But what we then did was loop 10. So we then wanted to put a loop just to the north of it because we wanted to take a sideways look at the target. So where we had the plan view, what perhaps we should have done in originally, and again, hindsight's 20/20, but it's a lesson that Kavango has learned. We then sighted loop 10. And to our surprise, it was loop 10 that then picked up these other 2 conductors. So loop 10 obviously gave us a clearer view of the B1 target, but also what loop 10 then did was pick up B3 and B4. And if I take you back to this image here, we then did loops 11 and 12 to get obviously the clear target delineation on those 2 new targets that we've identified. So this is how the whole campaign has developed. It's very much been an evolving process. We have made, we've learned lessons along the way. There were some things that we got wrong because obviously this is all new to us. We are applying this new technology to this new region. So of course, there will be things that you'll learn as you go along. But in terms of our exploration method now and what we've learned about this, God, Mark, I mean, we're in real fighting shape to take on the KSZ.
Wow. Okay. Well, I mean, you said at the start, didn't you, that you've been a little bit quiet on the KSZ, and I think that's definitely been noticed. But clearly, there's been work going on. You've not been not doing anything, and it's very clear to see from looking at this that things have moved on significantly since the last time we discussed the KSZ on one of these features. So clearly, huge progress has been made over the last year here, and as we've said time and time again, it's another piece to the jigsaw, another piece to the puzzle, always getting slightly more complex, but also just narrowing down all the time, I guess. And that's what you have to do in these environments, and until you find what you're looking for. And your drillers then, Mendea, they're very much on board, aren't they, as well? So
100%.
You can almost get going immediately when ready.
We've got a great relationship with Mendea. I mean, look, they've now executed 2 complex drill campaigns for us with 99% core recovery. They've drilled nearly 5,000 meters of diamond core, and they've been a wonderful partner to work with. But I'd just actually like to pick up on a point that you were making there about sort of putting together the pieces of the puzzle and sort of narrowing in on our targets. I made reference today in the RNS because I did want to talk a bit about this. I've recently been introduced to a nickel expert, a guy who's got a lot of experience actually out in the field and also working in Southern Africa as well. And he's recently completed a site visit. Now, obviously, I know that the proof of concept drill report, shareholders are eager for that to be released. I haven't wanted to release that prematurely because what I don't want to do is put something out into the public domain that we don't have complete confidence in and where there's just too much guesswork. In the past, unfortunately, Kavango has put too much guesswork out there. But we as a company, we've now evolved, we've matured, we've developed and we've grown. And the guy that has just been out, Richard, he's extremely experienced, really good guy. He's understood the project. He's just completed a site visit out to Botswana. He's reviewed our core. He's met our teams. He's understood more about our processes on the ground. So he's now reviewing all of our data. He's making a series of recommendations for what we can do next in terms of using the core to guide our future exploration within the system. But this really is, I think, the sort of the final piece that we needed. So we're now just waiting for Richard's report. It will be publishable, so it'll be something that we will put in the public domain. And what that will do is that will bring together all of the petrology work. It will bring together the assay testing. It will bring together the core logging, the other geochemical work that we've we've done, obviously a lot of the geophysics as well. And we're going to put together a comprehensive exploration plan for what the next stages are in the KSZ. So I'm really, really excited. It's taken me a while to find the right person. Shareholders just have to trust me on this. I have beaten down every door I possibly could. And in this environment, it's been really difficult to find somebody who's been able to take the project on, because obviously with the nickel price performing as it has, it's an exceptionally competitive employment environment out there. All of the major companies have taken up all of the talent. So we're incredibly fortunate to have Richard now doing this work for us. He's managed to fit us in between other projects. I think this project's captured his imagination a bit as well. He recognises it's a huge, it's a big technical challenge, but he's based down in South Africa. So I think he'll be continuing to support us as we move forward as well. So I'm really looking forward finally to being able to release that report as well.
Okay, excellent. And he was visiting just the other day, just the 8th of July.
Yesterday. So we had a wrap-up call with him. Obviously, this is on Friday. We had a wrap-up call with him on Friday. So he got back from Botswana on Friday.
Mm-hmm. So awaiting for that proof of concept report to be released. That will be an interesting read for sure. Final modelling of the conductors prior to drilling. You're also doing some further TDEM and CSAMP as well, is that right?
Absolutely. So if I just take you back to the map of the KSZ. So we have the 30 kilometre strike in target area A, which I'm just highlighting on my map. We're also going to be putting out some more news on further modelling that Hillary's done on other target areas, both up in the KSZ North and in the KSZ South. So the magnetic model that we have a lot of confidence in it. Again, we've put this out sort of in the public domain before, but the great thing about Hillary's magnetic model is that we've twice now intercepted the Proterozoic, pretty much exactly where the model told us it would be. Now that's going to act, we think, as a very useful guide for us in future in terms of guiding our future exploration, and in particular the TDEM surveys. And what I'm really excited about is that we've now done just 12 TDEM surveys across the KSZ. I mean, that's a fraction of what we could do. So I'm looking forward to rolling this technology out together with the AMT as well, both across the KSZ North and KSZ South. And we can see what else is out there, and who knows, maybe we get lucky, maybe we find some more large-scale conductors greater than 10,000 Siemens in conductance.
Excellent. Okay, well, it's clear to see that there's an awful lot of work going on, Ben. This is real exploration. We're watching it real time, and you present it very well. It's unusual for a company to do that. You set it up very clearly. I think investors can appreciate that. There's a lot of detail there. When are you timelines, always a hard question, but when are you hoping to be active drilling again, do you think?
So next steps are really quite simple. We're going back to the two new conductor areas. We're going to run some more TDEM over this area to better define these targets. We have obviously the proof of concept report that will be coming out once we've got Richard's report in. We're currently cutting more lines at the Great Red Spot to do more AMT. That will obviously help us both in terms of the model that we're looking for here, the Norilsk style targets, but also with the IOCG model as well, so that we'll have a clearer view of the potential alteration system we're looking at down there. We've got the economics report on the IOCG. That's been a bit delayed. I mean, I've got to put my hand up there. I had COVID recently, which unfortunately has been again bloody disruptive. So we'll get the economics report out in the not too distant future. And then, of course, we'll be talking much more about our drill plans for later this year. We certainly are going to drill this B1 target. I mean, there's no two ways about it. We have to drill that. And the way these two targets are shaping up, I think these are also turning into targets that we'll have to drill. But I'm also very keen to know more about sort of what else might be out there in the KSZ. Now that we know, we've got a great deal of confidence that we've got the right people we're working with the right partners, Spectral Geophysics, Equity Drilling, Mindea. Obviously, our guys on the ground, they've learned a hell of a lot about this exploration methods. I want to take all of that experience and really apply it as best we can to the rest of the KSZ, because we simply don't know. There might even be better drill targets out there. I mean, just look at the size of this area. I mean, it's 450 kilometers long. A huge amount of magma has passed through this system, this over several billion years, and a huge amount has happened geologically in terms of all these cross-cutting faults. I mean, this is dream exploration territory. It's ballsy exploration, but obviously the prize on offer is potentially huge. So, let's get out there and understand as much as we possibly can about this, because as of today, Kavango has the strategic hold over this project. I mean, this is a huge potential company maker for us.
Excellent. Well, thank you very much, Ben Turney, the CEO of Kavango Resources, for presenting all that detail for us today.
Thanks for having me, Mark.
If you enjoyed this interview, then give us a thumbs up, a like or a retweet. Subscribe to us on YouTube or follow us on Twitter and hit that notification bell to be the first to know when we release new content. There's loads of great content on our website too, across all our programs at stockboxmedia.com. Thank you for watching.